That's the countryside. Then there's East Jerusalem. This is the small area of the city that Palestinians hope to make their capital someday. To that end, the Israeli government is implementing an increasingly fast-paced attempt to cleanse the area of Palestinians. Homes are being confiscated, others are being bulldozed and torn down. Some Palestinians are being given the option of tearing down their own home or paying the Israeli army for their expense. At the Palestinian neighborhood of Sheikh Jarrah, you can look this up on the internet because there's been a lot of publicity about this specific Palestinian neighborhood, Sheikh Jarrah, I met a family living in a small Red Cross tent set up in a street. As the mother and her little children huddled around a small Sterno stove, I heard how soldiers had evicted several generations of the Palestinian family from a home they'd lived in for 60 years. Now, a Jewish Orthodox group from Brooklyn, New York, is living in the property. Archbishop Desmond Tutu from South Africa has already visited with that family and declared their removal a travesty of justice. Let me tell you, it was a surreal moment when there, at that house, in front of that house, when the young American Jews came out of the house and began praying loudly in the street across from the tent as Friday night sundown began and Sabbath started. So you had the young Orthodox American Jews praying loudly in the street. In response, the evicted Palestinians across in the tent turned on their car radios and blasted verses from the Quran to drown out the Jewish Sabbath prayers. All the while, Israeli security forces stood by with flashing lights and machine guns poised. Can you say explosion waiting to happen? There's also an increasing crackdown on the leaders of the Palestinian nonviolence resistant movement. On December 10th, International Human Rights Day, one of the protest leaders I marched with when I was tear gassed was arrested. He was charged with weapons possession for holding an empty tear gas canister that had been shot at him. And I must confess then that I have committed that same crime because I picked up one of the empty tear gas canisters and held it up that was shot when it was shot at me. A week later, on December 16th, the leader of one of the largest grassroots anti-wall campaign was arrested and is being currently held without charge. Amnesty International has called for their release. Things had clearly changed on the ground, but something was also beginning to change inside of me. Even as I talked with so many Israelis and Palestinians who were doing amazing human rights work, even as I met Israeli Jews who are trying to stop the home demolitions of their Palestinian neighbors, and there are so many Israeli Jews who are trying to stop those demolitions, even as I heard of the increasing worldwide support for a boycott, divestment, and sanctions against Israel and companies who were making profits off of the occupation, companies such as Caterpillar, which makes the bulldozers that are destroying Palestinian homes, or Motorola, which provides communication devices used by Israeli soldiers in the occupied territories, or Hewlett-Packard, which makes the hand-scanning technology now starting to be used at some checkpoints. Even as I stood in the Aida refugee camp and saw Gandhi's words scrawled across that big cement wall, words saying, "Victory attained by violence is equal to defeat, for it is momentary." Even with all of this, I found myself becoming less connected to pathways of peace and more connected to anger. Not Palestinian anger, but my own. Until then, I always found it hard to understand how someone could resort to violence. Standing up for something made sense, but I just couldn't fathom how someone could hurt or kill another person to prove a point or to gain some ground. But as I stood in the checkpoints and watched the Palestinians debased and dehumanized, as I walked with UN workers who talked about the critical lack of food and medicine in Gaza, As I heard how the residents of the Aida refugee camp in Bethlehem are allowed running water into the camp once a week for 2 hours, as I saw how Palestinians were forced to live in walled ghettos, as I watched the rain pour down on little children who had been evicted from their home for no crime other than being Palestinian and living in East Jerusalem, as I saw all of this, something inside me began to shift. This was a war being waged by Israel against a predominantly civilian population. This isn't only about striking at terrorists or striking at armed militia. The Israelis are using their soldiers, their vast military superiority, and their justice system to wage war on children, women, families, and civilians. And no one is stopping them. One elderly Palestinian man said to me, "We are the ones being attacked. We have no army. We have no real soldiers. We have children who have rocks. We have angry boys who have some guns. We have a few men who have bombs. We have a few rockets. We have a lot of angry men in angry mobs. We have our own mistakes and our own past bad judgments. We have our own incompetent, corrupt leadership exploiting all this. We have other Arab nations ignoring us, playing us for fools, using us, or selling us out. But we are here, and a quiet war is being waged against us here and now. We've been pushed into a corner. Should we just sit here and take it? Just watch our homes, our women and children, our lives, and our future wiped out, erased from the world's memory? When the Israelis strike with force, it is called security. When the Palestinians strike with force, it is called terrorism.